Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the official Vorel fan club. I'm your host, Jordan and/or Prairies. You can call me either. I am so excited for today's deck tech. You have no idea. Before we get into it, though, make sure you check out last week's video, which is a deck tech on Vorel of the Hulklade, which is my favorite commander and my first ever deck tech on YouTube. Without further ado, let's get into today's deck tech. Today, we have a commander and background pairing of Baeloth Barrityl, Entertainer, and Noble Heritage. This, my friends, is something I am so excited about. It is Boros Goad Equipment Tribal. I am literally so pumped to tell you about this. I think it's a fantastic tech. So we are doing red and white things in terms of working with equipment. However, this is kind of outside of the usual realm of red and white, of where Boros typically sits. Personally, I just think it's a super fun way to play around with this color combo if you don't want to do the typical red-white thing. And I love, as a deck builder, trying to do things that are outside of the box. And so I know goading is not typically part of red and white's typical strategy. And so that immediately appeals to me. And I love a challenge. So if you're like me, let's go down this road together, shall we? Our first commander today is Baeloth Barrityl, Entertainer. Legendary creature, elf shaman for 4 and a red from Battle of Baldur's Gate. Creatures your opponents control with power less than Baeloth Barrityl's power are goaded. They attack each combat if able and attack a player other than you if able. Whenever a goaded attacking or blocking creature dies, you create a treasure token, and then he says choose a background. He's a 2/5. What we're doing here is Voltron and Forced Combat. We want Baeloth to get super big with equipment, with +1/+1 counters, etc., and then force everyone else's creatures to attack each other, get life totals down super low, and then swing in with Baeloth for the win. So for example, let's say we get Baeloth's power up to 8. That means every creature our opponents control 7 and below are goaded constantly, as long as Baeloth is on the field, and that is freaking amazing. And then on top of that, whenever a goaded attacking or blocking creature dies, you create a treasure token, which means that we are going to be making a bunch of treasures. Now, that's not what I've built the deck around today. I've been focusing more on the goading and the Voltron aspect of everything, but you could absolutely build around the treasure token stuff as well. Now, there are actually a couple options for Baeloth that are really fun and entertaining, but the best one I found was Noble Heritage, which is a legendary enchantment background. And if you're unfamiliar, Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate has introduced backgrounds as these cards that can be your second commander, just like the partner mechanic. So let's say that I chose Baeloth and a green background, then my deck would be in Gruul colors, red and green. Okay, with that out of the way, Noble Heritage is again a legendary enchantment background, 1 and a white. It says, commander creatures you own have, when this creature enters the battlefield and at the beginning of your upkeep, each player may put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature they control. For each opponent who does, you gain protection from that player until your next turn, which means you can't be targeted, dealt damage, or enchanted by anything controlled by that player. So right away, this kind of screams Baeloth and specifically like a Voltron strategy, because as soon as he enters, and first of all, you're getting Noble Heritage out on curve. It only costs 2 mana and Baeloth costs 5, so you're most likely going to have this on the field before you cast Baeloth. And then when you cast him, he will be coming in as a 4/7 immediately. And then on the next turn, he's going to be a 6 power. And then on top of that, you're adding equipment and all the other things that you have in your deck that up his power. But not only are you upping his power, if your opponents so choose, they can also buff up their own creatures, probably in hopes that they'll eventually be able to kill you with it. However, in the meantime, as they're being goaded, they will be taking your opponent's life totals down, which is the exact strat of the deck. And the beautiful thing is, some players won't take you up on this offer, but that just means that you're getting a super one-sided deal and it's only benefiting you at that point, and that's a win-win. Oh yeah, and by the way, if your opponents do take you up on that, you then get protection from them, which means that you can swing in with your creatures, specifically Baeloth, and not have to worry about them being dealt damage and killed in combat. Sounds like a pretty spicy synergy to me, so let's get brewing. All right, just like the last deck tech, we're going to be going over mana base first, then instants and sorceries, artifacts and enchantments, then creatures. So let's get into it. All right, the first featured card of our mana base today is Sunhome, Fortress of the Legion. It is a land originally printed in Ravnica, City of Guilds. It says tap to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, or you can pay 2 in Boros, so 4 total to tap. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn. So the synergy is pretty obvious here. You have a land that can tap for colorless, which is great. However, that activated ability ability on the land is fantastic. Target creature gains double strike. That's going almost exclusively at Baeloth to probably kill strike someone. The great part about lands having activated abilities, and I just love including lands like this in any of my decks, is that they're on lands. They are not enchantments or equipment or instants and sorceries that people can counter. Artifacts and enchantments that do these things tend to get destroyed. So not a lot of people are playing land destruction, so this should be able to stay on the field and be useful to you at basically any time. And it is not hard in this deck at all to get Baeloth to 8, 10, 12 power, and it does not take long either. So this is a very useful thing if you want to kill someone with commander damage or bring them extremely close. And also with all the goading and the forced combat that we're doing, people are going to have low life totals. So this double strike, even if Baeloth is a 6 power, could end up being really, really useful. All right, next up we have a pet card of mine, Tyrite Sanctum. It is a land from Kaldheim. It says tap and add colorless, or you can pay 2 and tap it, and target legendary creature becomes a god in addition to its other types. Put a +1/+1 counter on it. Or you can pay 4, tap it, sacrifice it, put an indestructible counter on target god. So this isn't necessarily efficient by any means. Tapping 2 and then tapping 4 and then losing the land afterwards is not the greatest, but the indestructible counter really lends itself to a Voltron strategy, especially since we're going to be swinging with Baeloth all the time. And listen, you know your boy loves utility, and this card does stuff. It's not just a land that sits there. It has options that you can use if you're ever in a tight spot. And it has an additional synergy with our deck because that first activated ability puts a +1/+1 counter on our commander, which allows him to goad more creatures. And it's $1, so put it in your decks. All right, the last card in our featured mana base is Heraldic Banner, which is a 3-drop artifact from Throne of Eldraine. As Heraldic Banner enters the battlefield, choose a color. Creatures you control of the chosen color get +1/+0, and you can tap it for adding 1 mana of any color. So obviously in a multicolor deck, the mana fixing is super helpful. Adding 1 mana of any chosen color is going to be really great for fixing our mana. However, the additional synergy is creatures you control of the chosen color get +1/+0, which means we'll be choosing red pretty much all the time, because that means with Noble Heritage and Heraldic Banner out before we get Baeloth on the field, when Baeloth enters, he'll be a 5/7 just right out the gate, and that is extremely powerful. We'll be forcing things to attack like Esper Sentinel, like all the mana dorks and tokens that people have made so far in the game, and that just scales from there. All right, moving on to instants and sorceries. Our first one of the day is Congregate, which is a 3 and a white instant from Urza's Saga. It says target player gains 2 life for each creature on the battlefield. So this, in my opinion, is just one of the most slept on cards in the game. It's an instant speed, and yeah, maybe 4 mana is a lot for some people, but this effect on the right board, on most boards, I feel like, late in the game can literally swing the tide in your favor. Just as a quick example, let's say you're at 2 life and there are 10 creatures on the board. You will literally be gaining 20 life, putting you back up to 22 life, and that can literally win you the game. It can buy you time to live for another turn or 2. And look at how cheap, it's 13 cents. Literally go and get this. I slot this into every deck that runs white and I'm never disappointed. All right, next up we have Outmaneuver, which is X and a red instant from Urza's Saga. It says X target blocked creatures deal combat damage to defending player instead of to blocking creatures this turn. So if you have the mana in like a go wide token deck, this card does a lot of work. However, this card in this deck only costs 1 and a red because we're really only going to be using it to target Baeloth. So let's say someone has a blocker. When we swing Baeloth at them, we cast this. Baeloth deals its 8, 12, 16, whatever damage directly to that player instead of to blocking creatures this turn. It's like pseudo unblockable, which is really good in this deck. All right, last up on our instants and sorceries is Bond of Discipline, which is a 4 and a white sorcery from War of the Spark. It says tap all creatures your opponents control. Creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. So the downside of playing forced combat decks is a lot of times you are making everyone else attack each other, but then when it comes down to the one-on-one matchup, you just fall short because you don't have as strong a board. This is where this 9-cent godsend of a card comes in, because now we can tap all creatures our opponents control, leaving it super wide open for Baeloth or our other creatures that we have to swing in for the win. And the lifelink's not too shabby either. All right, up next are artifacts and enchantments. All right, first up we have War Cadence, which is 2 and a red enchantment originally printed in Mercadian Masks. It says, pay X and a red. Creatures can't block this turn unless their controller pays X for each blocking creature. So with Baeloth's second ability, we're going to be making a ton of treasures ideally throughout the game, and I wanted ways to use them in this deck. We're not running crazy expensive equipment or creatures or anything really too hugely expensive, so this activated ability from War Cadence is a great place to put our extra treasure tokens, our extra mana, and it synergizes with our strategy, which is swinging in for damage. Let's say you sack 4 treasures and pay a red into War Cadence. That means in order to block Baeloth, your opponent has to pay 4 mana plus lose their blocking creature more than likely. And that's a very spicy. Next up, we have Ghostly Prison, which is from Champions of Kamigawa. It's 2 and a white enchantment. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each creature attacking you. This one's pretty straightforward. In any Voltron strategy, you're going to be pretty wide open to attacks from opposing players, and Ghostly Prison is a way to ensure that people do not attack you. They're going to have to pay 2 mana for each creature. No one's got time for that. Well, they might, but they have to really, really want you to die. But ideally with Baeloth out on the field, goading everything, this shouldn't be too much of a worry, but we need a little safety net sometimes. All right, we have our first equipment of the day. It's Barbed Battle Gear. It costs 3. It's an artifact equipment from Scars of Mirrodin. Equipped creature gets +4/-1, and it equips for 2. Equipment are the main way we're going to be buffing Baeloth's power throughout the game, and I was looking through a bunch of equipment cards that just had a huge boost in the power stat, and this was one of them. It's a relatively cheap card to get out for what it does, and it doesn't really hurt Baeloth's toughness because Baeloth is a 2/5 starting out. So this will make him a 6/4. And on top of the +1/+1 counters Noble Heritage will be putting on, I mean, dude, oh my god. And it's 14 cents. You have to do it. Get the card. And you know, obviously there are upgrades you can make to this deck where cards are better and higher quality, but they're going to be more expensive, so I tried to keep a budget in mind. Now this is an extremely fun card we have up next. This is Bone Horde, which is 4 artifact equipment from Neon Dynasty Commander. It says Living Weapon. When this equipment enters the battlefield, create a 0/0 black Phyrexian Germ creature token, then attach this to it. Equipped creature gets +X/+X, where X is the number of creature cards in all graveyards. Equip for 2. So as soon as I saw this card, I thought that this just fit great, and for 8 cents this is such a great synergy. You make a token when it comes in, and that's all fine and dandy. The real fun starts when you start equipping this to Baeloth. After the goading's been going on a while, people's graveyards are full of hopefully their dead creatures, and this can make Baeloth super huge, which I'm sure you understand by now means more goading, more treasures, and just more fun to be had by you mostly. Dingus Staff. Say with me. Dingus Staff. You're looking at the best card in the game. This is a 4-drop artifact that says whenever a creature is put into any graveyard from play, Dingus Staff deals 2 damage to that creature's controller. And it was originally printed in Weatherlight. So obviously in most builds actually, this is not going to do too great for you. However, because of the goading and Voltron strategy we're running, we're not going to be running a lot of creatures, so it's minimal risk for us and maximum damage to our opponents whose creatures are going to be dying hopefully a lot. And that incremental life loss will be crucial to getting in for either commander damage or just regular kill shot damage with Baeloth. Last artifact and enchantment is Trading Post, which is a 4-drop artifact from Core Set 2013. It says, pay 1 and tap to discard a card and gain 4 life. Pay 1 and tap. Pay 1 life. Put a 0/1 white goat creature token onto the battlefield. Pay 1 and tap. Sacrifice a creature. Return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. Pay 1 and tap. Sacrifice an artifact. Draw a card. Utility, utility, utility. Anyways, this is another way to use all of our extra treasures. We're really only going to be paying attention to the pay 1 life and the sacrifice an artifact part of this card, but you can use the other ones if you have a need for them. Specifically that last ability, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a game where I'm just flush with mana or treasures and don't have anything in my hand that I can use. You can literally just pay 1 and sack the treasure, which is an artifact, and draw a card, which I think is invaluable. And honestly, if you're in a pinch, you can use the Goat ability to make blockers. Moving on to creatures, let's go. Recursion, Recursion, Recursion is the name of the game for this next card. It's Tiana, Ship's Caretaker. She costs 3. Boros, which is red and white. Legendary creature, Angel Artificer, originally printed in Dominaria. Flying and first strike. Whenever an aura or equipment you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may return that card to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So Tiana's for sure a pet card of mine. I've always loved her last ability. Honestly, and flying in first strike is not too shabby either. But this allows us, okay, so we know our opponents are going to be targeting our Colossus hammers and the like, and Tiana makes sure that we don't lose those permanently. And honestly, she's not a bad second option for another beater if we lose Baeloth or his commander tax becomes way too high to pay for. Flying in first strike combined with all that equipment, dude, I mean, that's pretty scary. Next up is Nils, Discipline Enforcer. He's 2 and a white, legendary creature, human cleric from Commander 2021. At the beginning of your end step, for each player, put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature that player controls. Each creature with 1 or more counters on it can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless its controller pays X, where X is the number of counters on that creature. So first of all, he's kind of a daddy, let's all face it. Second of all, that first ability is great because we are in control of putting the +1/+1 counters. We get to decide which creatures get them and which don't. So we'll be buffing opponents' creatures, having them swing at each other and not us. And on top of that, it says each player, which means we get to buff Baeloth at the end of our turn. And then that second ability acts as a scalable ghostly prison effect where the creatures we want to attack our opponents, with Nils on the field, it makes it even more difficult for them to come back and attack us. Wow, we are already at our last creature of the day, but before we get to it, I want to just thank you guys for watching this far. And if you dig the video, give it a like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Let me know what you want to see next or what cards I should or should not have included. I really appreciate every single one of you who has watched, and without further ado, let's get back to our last card. The last card of this deck tech is Komainu Battle Armor, 2 and a red, artifact creature, equipment dog from Neon Dynasty Commander. It has Menace. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has Menace. Whenever Komainu Battle Armor or equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, goad each creature that player controls, and I can reconfigure for 4, which says pay 4 and attach to target creature you control, or unattach from a creature, reconfigure only as a sorcery. So basically, Kamigawa and Neon Dynasty had these new equipment artifact creatures that doubled as creatures and equipment. We actually have a couple of them in this deck because I think they just work so well, both as potential blockers as well as ways to buff up our commander. This set of cards honestly reminds me a lot of the Zendikar dual lands that we just saw recently, in that they're super utilitarian, where instead of doing one cool thing on one card, they can do multiple cool things on one card, and that's pretty sick. But Komainu Battle Armor honestly works as a creature itself. It doesn't even need to be an equipment on Baeloth. It's just another way for us to goad people's creatures without having to worry that our strat is screwed if someone keeps targeting our commander all game. And then, if and when you do need to attach him to Baeloth, he is a great piece of equipment. It gives Baeloth a power buff, which helps with the goading, and it gives Baeloth Menace, which is a form of evasion. Fantastic for a Voltron strategy. All right, and just like that, we are at the end of our Boros goading Voltron journey. Thank you for making it all the way with me. I really, really appreciate it. Make sure you go check out all my stuff in the description, including the full deck list, which is available on Archidekt for everyone. And hey, you know what else is in the description? My Patreon. If you want to go check that out, I'd really appreciate it. There's going to be lots of amazing benefits for patrons, including priority and giveaways, deck lists custom made by me, and much, much more. So go check that out in the description. All right, guys, thanks for being part of the fan club. I'll see you on the next video.